Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Haku Falls in Love with Naruto Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto scowled at Kakashi and asked, "Why doesn't Sakura-chan or you help me with tending to Haku-san?" Kakashi sighed and replied, "Because, Zabuza said that you, not me, not Sakura or even Sasuke, were responsible for Haku-san. Haku is boy, and I'm quite sure that Sakura isn't ready to see a boy. Now go tend to Haku's wounds and clean him up. He will be a good addition to Konoha. You can use some of your extra clothes for Haku-san to wear until we can get his stuff from their hideout or lair." Naruto grumbled, but also saw the glare from Sakura. She had told him earlier that she was really pissed that he had saved the life of the person who had hurt her, Sasuke-kun. He also knew that Sasuke might not be so friendly towards Haku, but now that he was responsible for Haku, he would do what needed to be done. After all, a Hokage has to take care of the village and he was going to be Hokage and someone who they consider their first friend. He awkwardly carried Haku into the bathroom, making sure not to step on his long dark hair or jostle him too much while carrying him. Naruto then took off all his clothes and then proceeded to open Haku's battle kimono. He looked at the scar that was now present in the middle of Haku's chest, but continued to remove the robe gently, while he tried not to hurt Haku any more than possible, since Haku was still unconscious. He laid Haku down on the floor and then noticed the lithe body yet again, but something was off and he couldn't place it. He did notice that Haku's chest muscles were a little off, but didn't worry about that. He chuckled when he found out that Haku also wore boxers. He guessed that Haku's size was actually about the same as his. He then gently pulled the boxers down and noticed Haku's chest move, as if it were made of jello instead of muscle. Strange. He thought to himself, but quickly forgot about it. He then threw the clothes off to the side. He sighed at having to do this. Then a feeling struck him and he looked down at Haku's pubic area and found nothing other than a tuft of dark brown or black hair. He swallowed hard at this, but then a deep moan caught his attention. He then realized that he was actually a she. The blood that covering her chest had thrown his perception that Haku might have been male off. He now realized that her were small, but also that they would fit well with her physique and her story. At least he guessed they did. He blushed brightly when he saw her brown eyes flutter open. "I'm sorry, I didn't know," he said apologetically. Her face turned away, as if in shame. "So, now you know," she said quietly, as he noticed shame written all over her face, as he turned to face her. He closed his eyes and waited for her to hit him. When the blow never came he spoke, hoping she would continue the path of non-violence. "Well, since I thought you were a boy, I'm sorry. I was told to clean you up and help with your recovery, since I'm responsible for you now," he said the last part in a whisper. She reached up and touched her chest and found not a hole, but a firm skin and sternum beneath it. She was sure that Kakashi had put his hand through her chest. She turned to the blonde who had turned his head again, but failed to cover himself. "So he's dead then and we failed?" she asked meekly. Naruto turned to her with a hurt look in his eyes and said, "Yay, Zabuza's dead and I'm sorry about that, but he died trying to protect you from Gato, after the jerk betrayed both of you." He swallowed hard, but continued to keep eye contact and said, "He told me that I was responsible for you now. I'm not sure what that means, but I promise that I'll do my best." Haku smiled sadly and said, "I am your servant, tool, or slave, whichever you prefer. I'm only but a tool, and a broken one at that." "Slave?" he asked quietly in confusion. Haku nodded and looked back up at the ceiling and replied, "Very well, slave it is then. I will endeavor to serve you to the best of my abilities, master." She then changed the subject and said, "Now since you've seen me, it would be prudent for you to help me get cleaned up and then get me to bed, so I can rest and recover." "I'm sorry about seeing you," he said remorsefully. "It doesn't matter, Naruto-kun. What is done is done. Do you like what you see?" she asked without any real emotion. Naruto looked at her again, his eyes traveling down and then back up again her figure. He took a deep breath and replied, "I really don't know how to judge what would be nice or not," he admitted. "I see it in your eyes. You've been hurt badly before. You were isolated like I was, weren't you? She asked, as she raised a hand to meet his, while he helped her to the chair. She saw him nod, but he said nothing. She then continued, then Zabuza-sama was right. He looked at her in confusion, until she continued, you're a Jinchuriki, aren't you? She noticed the discomfort in his demeanor. She smiled warmly and said, Zabuza had told me about those who possess malevolent chakra, since he knew Yagura, who he said had the 3 tails sealed within him. He warned me that you might be one and you would be the right age to be the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi that attacked the village of Konoha. That was one of the only explanations we could come up with on how you were able to create so many shadow clones, also having Sharingan Kakashi as your sensei, to help make sure that the beast is controlled. The Sharingan is rumored to be able to control the tailed beasts. Me being a bloodline holder from Kiri and you being a Jinchuriki, I can somewhat understand that your life was similar to my own in several ways. I wondered about the malevolent chakra that you used against me in our fight, finally beating me with when all else failed, and then it finally hit me that you might be a Jinchuriki. Because of what Zabuza said, I will serve you well, Naruto-sama. Naruto looked at her and she opened her arms and fell forward into him. He became rigid at her touch. She began to rub her hand on his back and he was slowly starting to shake. Haku-chan, he said at only a whisper. He slumped to his knees and into her arms. He knew that he was mostly holding her up, but he also wasn't used to such close contact. He also had pent-up emotions, since she had figured out his secret so easily. He then asked, what do you want from me? Only to serve you, Naruto-sama, and maybe we can find some happiness together, Haku whispered into his ear. Do you mean it? He asked in a hopeful tone. With all my being, Naruto-sama, she replied warmly. She then said, we should get me cleaned up and then I can direct you to my hideout to get my belongings from there. He nodded and helped her back onto the chair. He did his best to push down the blush while he helped her wash her body. He got an eyeful while they finished cleansing her body of her own blood. He did notice the blush she wore when he cleaned her legs. He also helped dry her off and helped her into a spare pair of his boxers and one of his shirts. He then dressed into a new jumpsuit himself and helped her out of the bathroom and onto a futon for some rest in a room that Tsunami had set aside for the two of them. XXXXXXXXXXX. Kakashi wasn't sure they were doing the right thing, but he did promise that Naruto would take care of Haku. Since the boy had a bloodline trait dealing with ice, it would benefit Konoha to have the boy in Konoha. Also, the boy was a solid Chunin or even low-level Junin. He just wasn't sure how Naruto would adjust to having the boy in his life. Both were outcasts and that should help them bond. The big problem was his other 2 students. Sasuke would not like that Haku had beaten him and in turn that Naruto had beaten Haku. Sakura knew that Haku had hurt Sasuke, but she wouldn't be too much of a problem for Haku, even in his weakened state. He was brought out of his musing when Naruto came down in clean clothes and waved him over. Kakashi walked over to Naruto, while wondering what his most outrageous student had for him this time. What do you need, Naruto? Kakashi asked. We might have a problem, Naruto whispered to his teacher rather nervously. What could that be? Kakashi asked. Haku's a girl, Naruto replied in a whisper, bringing a cold shiver down Kakashi's spine. Let's go speak to Haku-san then, he said in an even tone. Both walked up the stairs and into the room where Haku was laying down on a futon in Naruto's room, wearing one of Naruto's shirts. He then noticed that Haku was female, not just feminine looking, but female. He closed the door behind the both of them and asked, so Haku-san, do you have something to tell me? Haku grimaced, while sitting up and nodded her head towards the copy ninja. I have 2 things to tell you. First is that I am a girl, but would rather your other students not know this fact if possible. Second, am I correct in that Zabuza-sama said that Naruto-kun is responsible for my care? She asked and saw Kakashi nod his response, so she continued, given the answer that you and Naruto-kun have both given me, I'm now his slave and servant. He may do with me as he wishes. I will also see to it that he becomes stronger along with your training or die by his hands if that is his wish. Naruto fell over backwards when she mentioned being his slave and him possibly wanting to kill Haku. Kakashi sighed, but replied, I have no problem with you helping him with his training, but in Konoha we don't have slaves. We will also have to talk to the Hokage and see what he decides to do with you. More than likely you won't be able to be a shinobi, but I'm sure that you will be welcomed. I would like to return the favor that Naruto-kun gave me. He gave me my life back, so I swear to serve him in any way I can until death, she explained. Rest Haku-san and we will see what we can do to make sure that you can help Naruto here, Kakashi said happily, as he patted Naruto on the shoulder. Haku again grimaced, as she nodded to the elder shinobi. Thank you Hatake-san. I promise to serve you well Naruto-sama, she said with a smile on her face. I will leave you too, so that both of you can discuss things, Naruto, Haku-san, Kakashi said, just before he left and closed the door behind himself. Naruto looked at Haku in confusion. What is he talking about? He asked. Haku sighed and replied, he means that since I have promised to serve you, we need to discuss the extent of my service to you. Naruto tilted his head and said, huh. Haku giggled into her hand and then said, Naruto-kun, I owe you my life and my existence is now in your hands. Since this is the fact, you now own me mind, body and soul. I will do anything to make your life better. It is my promise to you. You don't need to go so far, he replied, but was quickly cut off. Yes I do, I found a gentle and kindred soul in you. You are the second person who I have pledged my life to and this time I will not fail. Zabuza-sama was the man I admired and cared deeply for. In the short time that I have gotten to know you I have figured out a couple of things. I know that you would never mistreat me, no matter what. I would give you my body and have your children to prove that I was worthy of your service, she said pleadingly. I don't really understand, but I would want to be your friend before we got to all that mushy stuff, he explained. She giggled and he scowled, not understanding that he had reinforced her feelings in the matter. He couldn't stand his confusion anymore, so he asked, what are you laughing at? You're so cute, Naruto-kun, Haku said with a giggle. She then cleared her throat and said, I will help augment your training, Naruto-sama. Naruto's face became bright at that comment and he asked, do you mean it Haku-chan? Haku nodded, but then she scowled and said, Naruto-sama, you can only call me Chan when we are alone, otherwise san or no honorific will be necessary. I don't want people to know that I'm female just yet. Maybe a little later, but not as of yet, it isn't safe. I want to make your life better and by doing that which might make my own better. Do you agree to this, master? Naruto appeared to think for a moment and then said with a smile, sure, I'll do anything to make my first real friend happy. Haku smiled at this answer and held his hand while she explained where the hideout was, how to use storage scrolls and what he would need to take. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto had found the hideout after sending out several shadow clones. He entered the hut and found the rooms in the exact order that Haku had described. He took out the scrolls that Haku had prepared for him and began to store everything he could find. After an hour and several embarrassing moments, such as storing away her intimates, drawer and a couple books of human anatomy with pictures, he came back to Tezuna's home a few hours later. He went up to the room with dinner for both Haku and himself. She was sleeping peacefully, but stirred at the smell of food. She opened her eyes and let him help her into a sitting position. I would like your help getting me ready for the trip to Konoha, she said. Does that mean? He asked tentatively and swallowed hard. She nodded, as she ate her food. So you want me to help you put your panties on? She swallowed her food and then took a drink of tea. She then replied, yes Naruto-kun. I want you to familiarize yourself with my body, so that you can become a better shinobi. Again, I thank you for saving my life. Now we eat and then we prepare for bed. I should be able to dress myself in the morning. Now let's talk about your abilities and ninja techniques. Naruto forgot all about having to help dress Haku, when the subject of techniques came up. The next few minutes were used to eat and discuss the techniques he knew. She scowled at him limited aptitude for techniques. She went into what she knew and how far he had come in his learning of shinobi ways. She found that he was fairly attentive until a subject would not be to his liking. Such subjects would cause him and his mind to wander. While not wanting to step on Kakashi's toes, she wanted to make sure her new master could take care of himself and thereby making her servitude worthy. They finished dinner and he took the plates downstairs. He actually saw the scowl coming from his crush and asked, "Why are you so angry, Sakura-chan?" "Don't call me that. You kept the person who hurt Sasuke-kun alive and now you're going to take him back to Konoha." "I don't like it," she explained angrily. Kakashi sighed and said, Now, Sakura. He did as his heart told him. Can you fault him for that?" "Yes, I can, and he is the cause of Sasuke-kun's pain," Sakura replied in an angrily huff, while pointing at Haku, who had just entered the room. Haku put a hand on Kakashi's shoulder and said, "I see that you do not accept my being here, so I subject myself to Naruto-sama's discipline. He may do with me as he pleases, since I am his servant. You'll just get out of being disciplined by him, since he is too weak to handle you," Sakura said in a harsh retort. Haku's face became dark and she glared at the pink-haired girl. She then said angrily, "If it weren't for Naruto-sama then you would be quite dead along with your precious Uchiha. While he was able to activate his eyes, he was not able to best me, while on the other hand Naruto-sama was able to." "That's because Sasuke-kun wore you down," Sakura replied smugly. "No, there would be no way that I could have beaten Naruto-sama. His grief and anger at his loss were too much, as is his power. He wanted to protect both you and the Uchiha boy," Haku explained, but then grabbed Naruto's hand and led him up to the room, leaving a stunned Sakura. She turned to Kakashi and asked, "Is that true?" Kakashi looked at Sakura and said, "Naruto was able to beat Haku-san and kept him alive even after receiving an attack to the central chest that destroyed his left lung and more than likely destroyed his aorta. So don't sell Naruto short, he is strong, but not in the same way that Sasuke is. If someone with the same skills were to try to kill either you or Sasuke, he would be able to beat them, not easily, but he would still be able to beat them. He doesn't know his potential just yet, but he is learning." "But Kakashi-sensei, he wasn't able to do the chakra exercise as well as I was," Sakura said in a bragging tone. "It is easy to divert a creek with but a few stones, but to divert a river is quite a feat," Kakashi said cryptically, while Sakura looked at him in confusion. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto looked down when Haku had taken him into the room and locked the door. She lifted his head and asked, "Are you sorry that you saved me, Naruto-kun?" "No, it's just," he replied, as he trailed off and looked away. "Just that she didn't accept what you had done?" she asked sadly. "Yeah, I guess that's it," he replied in a dejected tone. "You like her, don't you?" she asked with a smile on her face. He nodded a reply, but then she asked, "How has she treated you over time?" "All right, I guess," he said in a not too convincing tone. "Tell me about how your interactions with her have been up until this point, Naruto-kun," she asked hungrily. "Well, when we first met, I helped to defend her from some bullies. I've done it a few times, but she got mad at me," he replied, but the last part was a whisper. "So you wanted recognition for your doing a good deed for her?" Haku asked with a wry grin on her face. "Yeah, I mean no, I didn't expect anything in return," he said defensively. Haku giggled at the boy in front of her and asked, "Have you ever been kissed?" Naruto's face went sour and he said under his breath, "Yeah, was bumped into a kiss with Tem." "So you lost your fist kiss to your rival. How cute," she replied in mock happiness. He growled and turned away from her, but when she didn't say anything he turned back only to find her face right in front of his. She gently tugged on his jacket and he fell forward onto her lips. They were soft and supple, much better than Tem's. She turned her head slightly to allow for a longer and deeper kiss. Her lips began to move and he mimicked her movement and his eyes drifted closed like hers had already done. It was a mechanical reaction, but very pleasurable. When it finally finished and she pulled away he felt a strand of saliva break between their lips. He looked at her with both wonder and confusion in his eyes. "You're wondering why I did that, aren't you?" Haku asked and Naruto nodded. She then explained, "You now have my first kiss. I had hoped that Zabuza-sama would have had it, but he isn't here, so I gave it to my new master. You have my heart along with my body. You can do anything you please with me, but also remember that you are responsible for me. I will be your lover, even if you have others. According to Kakashi, slavery isn't really legal in Konoha, so I will be your servant and consort. Given that was our first kiss together and there will be more. My job as consort is to instruct you in how to be a man. First lesson was kissing. We shall continue that lesson in a minute. We will also work out a training schedule for you and I, so that you can get stronger. Naruto dumbly nodded, as Haku again kissed him deeply. They broke and changed into their night attire. Naruto noticed she was wearing pajamas like him, but in different colors of course. After they made the futons, the door slammed open, breaking the lock, and an angry Sasuke entered the room. What is he doing here? And how did you defeat him? Sasuke asked, but more demanded. Haku-san, now we can have a polite conversation. Naruto asked threateningly. You will not order me, Dobi. Now answer my questions, Sasuke replied angrily. You wake up and the first thing you do is barge into my room and demand answers of me. Who had to clean up the mess at the bridge? Me, not your privileged Uchiha ass, Naruto attempted to explain, but was interrupted by a growling girl. Naruto, Sakura said angrily, as she entered the room and slugged Naruto in the jaw, sending him into the wall. Now answer me, how did that loser beat you when he couldn't even take on Sakura here? Sasuke asked angrily. Simple, he likes Sakura-san, Kami knows why, but he does. If he were to try and actually fight her, she would lose quite quickly, Haku explained. Naruto groaned and picked himself up off the floor. He wiped blood from his lip and scowled at Sasuke. Haku glared at the pink-haired girl and asked, Can I exact some vengeance, master? Naruto shook his head, but also saw Kakashi in the hallway looking rather angry. No, I think they will have some comeuppance in a minute or so, Naruto said cryptically, but realization appeared on Haku's face when she saw Kakashi slowly moving into the room. Right, now answer me, Sasuke said angrily. Yeah, answer, Sasuke-kun, Naruto baka, Sakura chimed in angrily. Both of the genin jumped when they heard Kakashi ask, what was the question? Sakura and Sasuke turned to Kakashi with a smiling glint in his eye. I wanted to know how he beat me, Sasuke replied. Kakashi's face turned into a scowl and he said, So you break into a teammate's room and demand answers from an injured and captured combatant. Haku-san is under Naruto's protection, so go easy on him. Also, you're scaring our hosts with your yelling, Sakura. Now we can discuss things on the way back. Good night, Naruto, Haku-san. Come with me, Sakura, Sasuke. We have a few things to discuss about etiquette. He shook his head and said just loud enough for everyone to hear, I figured it would be Naruto that I would lecture about these things. Naruto got up and closed the door and attempted to relock the door, but it had a broken locking mechanism. He was somewhat successful. He turned to find both the futons closer to each other than they were before. He swallowed hard when he saw the warm smile on Haku's face. We're not going to, tonight, are we? He asked tentatively. Haku shook her head with sorrow written over her face. We are not going to be lovers so quickly, Naruto-kun. We are going to work our way through the process. First we sleep in the same room and become comfortable with each other's presence. I noticed in the shower that you have an aversion to close contact that you don't initiate, she explained. Getting a confused look on his face, she continued, You froze when I hugged you in the shower. We need to get past that for anything to happen. Also, we need to work on your skills, for you sleep too heavily in the field. Oh, and by the way, we will be sharing the same bed when we get to Konoha. His eyes went wide, but he moved to the uncovered futon at Haku's bidding. She lightly kissed him and then whispered to him, You will also help me mourn for Zabuza-sama. XXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto woke up to find Haku struggling with getting out of her pajamas. He sighed and helped her out of them and into clean clothes, including panties and a wrap for her chest. He then dressed himself and they packed up their belongings. He also noticed the redness around her eyes, since he knew that she had cried herself to sleep in his arms the night before. They then headed down the stairs and joined the others for breakfast. Breakfast was a quiet affair and then Haku helped Tsunami with the dishes. Sakura glared daggers at Haku, but said nothing and finally went back to fawning over Sasuke. Naruto looked at this with new eyes. He had wanted the girl's attention for a couple reasons. First, he wanted to get her attention away from Sasuke. It was an ego thing. He finally determined to have something that Sasuke had. Secondly, he wanted her attention, because he felt, since he helped her, he deserved at least to be acknowledged by her. In a way, he was the idiot teammate. This depressed him, and even more so when she didn't even notice his lack of happiness around her. After the fourth dismissal from Sasuke for a date, she finally got her stuff ready. Naruto sighed heavily, but then noticed Haku sitting by his right side and Kakashi sitting on his left side. Kakashi spoke in quiet tones, but said, "I will support this, if and only if you work harder on getting along with your teammates, deal?" Haku nodded at this and Naruto looked down at the ground and then nodded agreement. Kakashi then continued, "I would like to know what you plan to teach Naruto, so that I can integrate it better into the team. I know the other two have problems, but with you at his side, he will start to correct the problems he has. I haven't been able to do it, maybe you can, Haku-san. Also, when you get into town, I would seek out Hyuga Hiyashi as a secondary sponsor for a clan, since I'm pretty sure you'll not be able to become a full-fledged shinobi, at least for a little while. Then seek out Naruto's personal physician. She can sponsor you in the hospital, as a possible medic nin. This will help to alleviate the extra burden of having two mouths to feed. It will also give you something to do while Naruto is on missions, or just to get some time away from him to help out your relationship." Haku bowed in her chair and replied in a similar whisper, "You are most gracious, Hataki-san. I will do as you ask, for Naruto-kun. First off, I will be teaching him weapons and stealth. Afterwards, we will be working on chakra control and beginning jutsu. His reserves are enormous with his problem." Kakashi's eye went wide, but he said nothing. He finally nodded and Haku continued, "I will lastly work on his speed after that. He can work on his strength during the whole time." She then scowled at him and asked, "Are there any merchants that will help him with proper shinobi clothing?" Naruto gritted his teeth and said quietly, "But I like orange." Haku nodded, but replied, "Orange isn't the problem. It is your blonde hair, and the bright orange that are the problems. You show up too easily. You can wear that around town, but I want you to wear something proper when on a mission." Naruto appeared to sulk, but then said, "But this outfit is comfortable." Kakashi put his hand out to catch the pair's attention and said, "I know of a couple people that don't hold anything against him, so he will be able to get stuff from them. We can go to them after you're debriefed." Kakashi chuckled at Naruto's eyes going wide, but then said, "They will be asking Haku-san questions, not taking his clothes off." Haku giggled and Kakashi chuckled when Naruto sighed heavily in relief. Kakashi stood up and clapped his hands together, while he said, "Well, time to go, since the bridge is done. We will escort Tazuna to the bridge and then bid him a fond farewell." The shinobi and the family approached the bridge, but were greeted by all the villagers, wishing the group a fond farewell. A couple of Naruto's clones came running up the bridge from behind the group. One handed Tazuna a scroll and winked at him before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. The second handed Naruto a scroll and nodded to him and Haku. Haku smirked, but said nothing. Sakura and Sasuke looked at the blonde in confusion, before Sasuke spoke up and asked, "What was that about, Dobi?" Naruto smirked and said, "Nothing." Sasuke rolled his eyes, but didn't continue his line of questioning. He was more interested in why the Kiri missing nin was going with them to Konoha and why was he staying so close to Naruto. The thing that disturbed Sakura, but only a little, was Naruto and Haku going arm in arm. Naruto explained it as way to help Haku travel. Even after the explanation from Kakashi that Naruto had inadvertently healed Haku with a forbidden technique and that Haku felt obligated to help Naruto. Too many things didn't fit. Sakura seemed oblivious to anything around them, but him, so he just ignored her. The trip back to Konoha was quiet, with only light conversation between Naruto and Haku about what life in Konoha was like. This was disturbing to both Sasuke and Kakashi, who knew that Naruto was hiding the truth from Haku, but Kakashi wasn't worried since apparently she understood the life of Jinchuriki was hard and knew that he was looking through rose-colored glasses. When they took a break, Haku would watch Naruto throw some kunai and shuriken. She would then correct him on his technique. After a couple days, the walls of Konoha came into sight through the trees. Haku had also talked Naruto into attempting to stick a leaf to his forehead. This worked, but not as well as expected. The leaf would stick for a minute, but then it would shred. While parts of the leaf would disintegrate into dust, another part would seem to gain condensation. Haku looked questioningly towards Kakashi, who looked on in fascination at how the leaf had done this. He might want to get some chakra paper to figure out what chakra type Naruto was. The team was ushered into the Hokage's office. "Hello, Team 7. I hear your mission didn't go as planned, and who might this be?" Hiruzen asked happily. Naruto shuffled, but answered, "Yeah, and this is Haku-san. We met him on the mission. He has a cool ability with ice." Hiruzen raised an eyebrow and asked, "So you're a Hyouten user?" Haku nodded, but didn't say anything. "I will ask you some question in a little bit." "Haku, Hokage-sama," Haku replied to fill in the missing information with a bow. He nodded at the information. The debriefing continued all the way until they left Wave, but left out the fact that Haku was female. Hiruzen noticed Naruto being very careful about how he described Haku and what was going on with Haku. He also was quite adept at avoiding referring to the Kyuubi directly. He also made sure to help Kakashi and Naruto hide the facts from their team. They would explain it to him later. After hearing the story, he dismissed Sakura and Sasuke. "So what information did you not want your team to know about Haku-san here?" Hiruzen asked with a veiled smile on his face. Naruto looked down and blushed, but then said, "Gigi, Haku's a girl." Hiruzen took a long draw on his pipe and then asked, "I see, so you want the fact that you're female hidden from others for now?" Haku nodded, but also said, "I am Naruto-sama's by battle rights and thus will only serve him. He is still a little young for that to happen, but I will be Naruto-kun's no matter what. Since I can't be with Zabuza, I will be with Naruto-sama." That wouldn't go over too well here, since you have a rare bloodline and a lot of clans would want to incorporate you into their clan, Hiruzen explained. He then asked, "Why are you so set on having Naruto-kun?" Haku bowed to the elder Hokage and replied, "Because he is responsible for me." "I see. Since I cannot allow you to become a shinobi at this time, I will allow you to work with another clan head and they will sponsor you as a clan leader and then Naruto-kun could be your concubine," Hiruzen said with a chuckle. He looked at Naruto, who just blushed heavily. He then shook his head and said, "That also might be a problem. Because he is the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi?" Haku asked pointedly. Hiruzen sighed and replied, "There are more complications than that when dealing with Naruto-kun." Haku raised an eyebrow and asked, "Such as?" Hiruzen sighed and looked at Naruto and asked, "Can you and Kakashi please leave us for a minute, Naruto-kun?" Naruto huffed, but both left the room. He sighed heavily again and said, "Naruto-kun has been alone almost his entire life and may not understand what you're offering." XXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto glared at the door and said, "It isn't fair. Why do they get to talk about me behind my back?" Kakashi chuckled and replied, "Because he is Hokage and we can't go against his will." A few minutes later, door opened and a very pale Haku walked out the door. She then asked, "Can we go home now, Naruto-kun?" Naruto reluctantly nodded, hoping she would talk to him. When she didn't, he led the way to his apartment. She quickly followed in his wake. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Kakashi entered the office and closed the door behind himself and asked, "So where will Haku-san fit in?" "I am thinking of having Haku-san entered into the medical corps for now and later if things go well, possibly interrogation. With the knowledge of herbs, learning medical techniques shouldn't be too hard," Hiruzen admitted. "So do you think that Haku-san can bring Naruto up to snuff?" Kakashi asked in a bored tone. The Hokage glared at the lazy Junin and replied, "That was supposed to be and still is your job. Haku-san will augment his training, but also now knows that he is very lacking and is very angry at me for letting him become so far behind. I had to put Haku-san straight on a Hokage's role in a village. I think Haku-san and I have an understanding. I also gave Haku-san a choice." XXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto led Haku to his apartment. He opened the door and both left their sandals in the entry. Naruto closed the door and when he turned Haku, who embraced him in a tight hug. "Please hold me," Haku asked in a pleading tone. "But, Naruto attempted to reply, but was also partially paralyzed by her touch. Please, was her only response, before she began to cry heavily. He awkwardly wrapped his arms around Haku and slowly began to rub her back. This continued for another 20 minutes. Her body then began to slack and he had to grab her and carry her bridal style to the bedroom. He looked around in fear and worry. The bed was not made, the floor had scrolls and ramen cups scattered around in haphazard fashion. After setting her on the bed, he created a clone, who began to pick up the room quietly. He then moved out to the kitchen and began to search it for food. Fresh food was not an option right now and he knew that cups of ramen wouldn't work for them tonight. She needed actual food. While ramen worked for him and it was delightfully tasteful for him, it would more than likely not work for her. He made another clone that changed into a young blonde girl with ponytails. He then handed the girl some money. He then proceeded to clean the apartment of clutter. He felt sorry that he really didn't have anything to offer to Haku. From what he understood, she was now devoting her life to him and only him. While he couldn't figure it all out, he was making do. Naruto understood that Haku needed some space, but he determined that he would be there for whatever she needed. His clone soon returned with some groceries and he began to try to cook. He cut the vegetables, which he didn't care for, but put them in a pot anyways. He followed this with noodles and some bouillon to give the soup some flavor. In actuality, he was making a sort of homemade ramen. He suddenly froze when he felt a pair of arms wrap around his upper chest and neck. He eased when he figured that the person behind him was doing so gently and then a chin rested on his head. Hey, Naruto said in mock protest. Hush, Naruto-kun, I need you, Haku's soft voice said from on top of his head. She then continued, Zabuza-sama wasn't much for affection, but I long for it and for his approval. I know for a fact that you want affection and approval. Naruto nodded at the statement and agreed wholeheartedly, but wasn't sure if he could deal with the close contact just yet. She said that she needed it, so he would comply no matter how uncomfortable it would be for him. So, what did you and Gigi talk about? He asked while he stirred the pot. He felt a tear hit his head, felt bad that he had touched on a bad subject. We talked about me and about you. He informed me that I have to meet with the torture and interrogation unit and also that unless I was ready to marry you that I could not be near you. I told him that I would not and could not live without you, she stated sadly, but he also heard some joy in her voice. She then continued, so Naruto-kun, you are now my husband. He turned inside her grasp and looked up into her eyes and asked, are you sure that you would want to be with a guy? She put her finger on his mouth and said, hush, Naruto-sama. While I'm not done mourning Zabuza-sama, it would be an honor to be the wife of the man who brought me back to life. If Zabuza-sama told you to be responsible for me, then I will do what it takes to make that happen. Naruto looked up at her in confusion and asked, so what does it mean? It basically means that I'm Haku Uzumaki, your wife. I signed the papers in the office, but also we have until the Chunin exams to consummate the marriage. If we do, we will be married by the Hokage after the exams, whether or not you make Chunin. With my bloodline and you being the Jinchuriki, we will be a new clan of Konoha. The wedding will be a quiet affair with only a small group knowing of the facts. This will limit the risks for both of us. I know that you have to be careful and I have been tasked with both becoming a medical shinobi and also your secondary trainer, so that you can be a good clan head. Until you can take over the running of a clan, I am supposed to do that job, Haku explained. Naruto looked up at her and asked in confusion, what does consummate mean? Haku kissed Naruto gently on the lips and pressed her forehead to his. You are cute when you don't have a clue, Naruto-kun, Haku said affectionately. She sighed and then moved to his ear and whispered into it. What? He exclaimed and then promptly passed out. Naruto woke to a warm sensation. He opened his eyes to see brown eyes and a mess of black hair draped down towards him. A warm smile greeted him and accepting blown eyes. He then realized that he was in Haku's lap. Naruto swallowed hard and then asked tentatively, do we have to do that now? Haku shook her head and replied, no, we can wait for a little bit, but if you want me to stay with you we will eventually have to do that, Naruto-kun. Naruto nodded and then it hit him, so he asked, what will this do to Sakura-chan and I? Haku shrugged and replied, I'm not sure, she doesn't seem interested in you right now. We shall see how it goes and then we will decide. Will that work for you, Naruto-kun? He smiled brightly and nodded emphatically. She then pressed a finger onto his nose and said, we will not mention this to anyone, until we both agree that it is the right time. We both have to grow. I still am working on dealing with Zabuza-sama's death and you have to learn to be with me, so we both have a lot to get used to. So would Zabuza be like a father to you instead of a lover? Naruto asked. That could be true, but I just don't know just yet. On another subject, tomorrow we will start your training, since I do not have to report to the Hokage tomorrow. I will accompany you to your team practice, if that is all right with you Naruto-kun, she asked and saw him smile and nod. She then smiled and said, shall we eat dinner? He nodded and got up. He started to walk towards the stove, but she put hand on his shoulder and guided him to a chair. You are my master and my husband. I will serve you, Naruto-sama, she said with a smile on her face. How did I get someone so pretty as you to care so much for me? He asked aloud. Haku blushed, but served the soup ramen and they had a quiet dinner. She cleaned up the dishes and they then made the bed and went to sleep. Naruto was in for another night of soft crying from the girl. He knew that she was incredibly strong, but also had a gentle heart. He knew that he would help her through her mourning. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto woke to a predicament. Haku during the night had become tangled up with him in the sheets, but also somehow his hand had gotten inside of her pajama top and he knew if he moved he might destroy the top, or even worse, incur her wrath for having his hands inside of her top. Her breathing changed and he noticed a smile and a warm smile. Naruto-kun, if you want me to remove my top, all you needed to do was ask her. You could have made it in order, she said happily, but her eyes showed hurt, but also some little amount of joy. She then undid the buttons, much to Naruto's embarrassment. When she finally removed the top, he was in an even worse predicament. She was now straddling him at the waist, without a top, and then she asked, are we to consummate our marriage this morning, Naruto-sama? The tone was guarded and possibly hopeful, but he also detected some trepidation. Naruto's eyes leapt from her to her face. He continued to turn bright red at this, but finally said, no, we're not ready yet. His hand gently caressed the scar on her chest, but then he steeled himself to not be a pervert. He moved to try to gently push her off of him only for his hands cup her. They were soft, but he also felt the muscle below them. He gently squeezed and saw the effects of this. Haku's eyes closed and she both leaned her head back and pushed her chest into his hands. He squeezed them gently. To his surprise and pleasure she began to rock back and forth. This continued until both their eyes opened suddenly and she sprang off of him and ran to the bathroom. For his part, Naruto was having trouble sitting up and his hands were still where they were when he was fondling her. He finally rolled off the bed and noticed the tent in his pajama bottoms. It took all of his willpower for him to get himself back under control. They proceeded to dress quietly and got ready to meet his team. Haku walked alongside of Naruto and noticed the glares that went towards Naruto. Naruto scowled, but appeared to ignore them for the most part. Haku for her part walked beside, but slightly behind Naruto to the training grounds. She then saw a transformation in the boy. He went from melancholy to happy in just a second. He then exclaimed, "Hey Sakura-chan." Sakura glared at the boy. She then walked over to Naruto and slammed her fist into top of his head. "I told you not to call me that," she exclaimed to the now unconscious blonde. She then backed off when she felt killing intent directed at her. She looked around and saw an angry Haku. "You are very lucky that he likes you, otherwise here I would have ripped you apart," Haku explained. Sasuke smirked, while Sakura began to sweat and swallowed hard. She then stutteringly said, "You, don't scare me." Haku raised an eyebrow and asked, "Really?" Naruto had woken up, sighed and then said, "Haku, that's enough, leave Sakura-chan alone." "Don't call me Chan," Sakura exclaimed. Naruto wore a worried look upon his face, but then Haku said, "Naruto-sama, we should start to train. We can work on your aim later. I have another exercise for you to do. This stream should do." Naruto stood up and followed Haku. She then began to explain the exercise. You have done the attaching exercise, correct? Huh? Naruto asked in confusion. You will have used a wall or tree to walk up it by using your chakra, Haku explained. Naruto nodded and then she continued. In this exercise we will work on a varying flow of chakra to stay on top of the water's surface. Now do what I do and do not worry if you do not succeed right away. Also don't go into the deep water just yet. She then put her hands in a ram seal and walked onto the water. The surface only slightly rippled when she stepped on the water. Naruto looked excited and exclaimed, "Wow. Now me." Haku nodded and he put his hands into the ram seal. They watched as dust left the area around his feet. Naruto then took a step onto the water. Well, his foot went into the water. Luckily for him it was shallow. He stood in the water and tried again. Sasuke scowled and then jumped onto the water, standing on its surface. "See, I'm not a loser like him," Sasuke said in a hurtful and sarcastic tone. Yes, but he didn't use a Sharingan to copy the technique. It is of more use to learn it for all you can than to just copy it and thus be able to use it. While I'm annoyed at you, Sakura-san, you should also try this exercise. I would suggest that you not do it long, Sakura-san, since your chakra capacity is much lower than Uchiha-san and Naruto-sama, Haku explained. The next 20 minutes were spent attempting to stand on the water. Sakura finally had to quit, due to low chakra, but Naruto was still working on getting fully to the surface of the water. Sasuke was walking on the water, but would occasionally sink some, not understanding why. Haku watched, but said nothing, hoping that Naruto would get it before the Uchiha boy. Several minutes later Sasuke had to abandon the exercise from having low chakra levels himself. Naruto continued strong, impressing both of his teammates. Both were wondering, just how much chakra does he have? Naruto finally began to get standing on the water and started moving across the surface. This was an hour later, when Kakashi finally arrived. He raised an eyebrow at Naruto doing water walking training. He just announced himself by saying, "Yo." Naruto kept concentrating, while Sakura yelled, "You're late." Naruto slowly walked back to the bank and then sighed heavily and sat down. Kakashi walked over to the group and said, "I see that you're training them another chakra control exercise." He turned to Haku and asked, "So how long were they able to do it?" Haku replied, "Sakura-san was able to do it for less than 20 minutes before heavily exhausting herself. Sasuke-san was able to work on it for 35 minutes before getting mildly exhausted. Naruto-sama was able to do it for over an hour and is barely winded." Kakashi clapped his hands together and then said, "Good, this is an example of chakra capacity and control. The exercise works on control, but will burn chakra quickly for those with genin levels of chakra capacity. That is the reason it is usually not taught to genin. Here is where I would rate you on your capacity and control. Sakura has low genin level of capacity and high chunin to low junin level of control. Sasuke has high genin to low chunin level of capacity and mid genin level of control. Naruto has low genin level of control at best." Sasuke smirked at this, while Sakura giggled and Naruto scowled. Kakashi continued, "But he has high junin capacity. He more than likely about twice or more the chakra capacity of myself." This surprised both of Naruto's teammates. Haku didn't seem surprised at all by Kakashi's statement. After some taijutsu spars and pointers from Haku on Naruto's form, the team prepared to take on a D-ranked mission. The team escorted Haku to the Hokage's building and from there she was escorted to the torture and interrogation unit. The mission completed quickly and Naruto waited outside of the T&I building for Haku to finish. A few hours later a man with a long blonde ponytail exited the building and looked at Naruto. Naruto could tell that the man didn't care for him, but at least the man tried to hide his disdain for Naruto. He re-entered and brought Haku back outside. "Naruto, Haku-san is now in your custody. He will remain so for the next 2 weeks. He is not to be alone outside of your apartment until someone from the medical division comes to pick him up to start training there. Do you understand?" the man asked. "Yes, sir," Naruto replied, but also implied that he wanted to know the man's name. The man sighed, but then said, "Yamanaka Inoichi, Ino's father. Now take him home, because he will need some rest. I would also get him some supplies. He will fill you in on the way. Naruto nodded, as he helped Haku to the store. Naruto changed into his female persona and bought some feminine hygiene supplies, for Haku's request, along with other supplies needed like toothbrush and other amenities. They then went to a clothing store and bought some extra clothes for Haku. When they got there, Haku was rather insistent that Naruto come back some other time and get himself some new clothes, but for the life of him he couldn't figure out why she wanted him to get some new clothes. They then headed to the market and then home. After a quiet dinner, Naruto was introduced to the fun of meditation. This lasted all of 5 minutes before Haku headed to bed in frustration. Naruto apologized, but Haku insisted that it was the questioning that had her tired and lacking patience, not his lack of focus. They then went to bed, where Naruto got yet another night of Haku crying herself to sleep. Naruto was worried that she might be broken like she had described, but could do nothing, since she held onto him tightly throughout the night. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto woke to a pounding on his door. Naruto was what he heard through the door and recognized it as Sakura. He was in a dilemma, since Haku and he were wrapped together by both the sheets and their position. He panicked when he heard the door open. Haku, wake up, Naruto exclaimed. Haku smiled warmly at Naruto, but then asked, what's wrong, Naruto-kun? Sakura's coming in. We forgot to lock the door last night, Naruto exclaimed while the pair attempted to extract themselves from each other in the sheets. Naruto, Sakura called into bedroom from the main room. Wait a minute, Sakura-chan, Naruto called out only to fall out of the bed and hit his head. Sakura ran into the room and saw Haku getting off the other side of the bed and an upside-down Naruto lying on the floor, head first. She giggled, but then asked with a gasp, are you two sleeping in the same bed? Naruto rolled to a sitting position and replied, yeah, like I have room for another bed in this apartment. Why are you here anyways? Sakura's face turned red and she replied, well, I wanted to thank Haku-kun for helping with training yesterday, but if I interrupted something then, I'll leave. Haku bowed and then said, you are welcome, Sakura-san, but don't think to assume anything about our living arrangements. Naruto-sama is a generous master and doesn't want me to sleep on the floor. Thus I will not argue with him about the sleeping arrangements. Haku's face became darker and she said, if you start any rumors, I will make sure that you pay for it, whether Naruto-sama approves or not. Also any help I would give you would stop immediately. I live to serve Naruto-sama and don't forget that, Sakura-san. If Naruto-sama had a separate room for me I'm sure that I would be using his, but he is an orphan like myself and he doesn't have that much money. Haku then took a contemplative pose and asked, would you disparage your friends if their whole family had to share a bedroom together? Sakura gave pause to the question, but then replied, I guess not, but it is kind of weird that you two are sleeping in the same bed. Naruto then smiled and asked, you ever had a sleepover? Sakura replied, sure, of course I have. He then smiled mischievously and asked, did you and Ino ever share the bed on a stormy night? Sakura blushed and replied meekly, yes we have. Well, Haku is still mourning Zabuza's death, so he both needs a bed to sleep on and someone close to help him out with the pain, Naruto explained. Still, it's kind of weird for two boys to share a bed, Sakura said. She then waved to the pair and left the apartment, closing the front door behind herself. Naruto breathed a heavy sigh of relief. Haku went around the bed and helped Naruto to his feet. They then began their morning routine, showering separately, getting dressed and then heading to the morning meeting with his team. XXXXXXXXXXXX. They approached the bridge to find Sakura panting heavily on the bank of the stream and Sasuke standing on the water. Naruto glared at Sasuke and asked, what did you do to her Tem? Sakura rolled her eyes and said quietly, if only he would take that type of interest in me. She then looked at Naruto and said, leave Sasuke-kun alone. We've been practicing water walking. Naruto cringed at her angry tone, but Haku whispered into his ear, do not aggravate her if you want her to be with you, Naruto-kun. I was hoping that I would be enough for you. He heard a hint of regret in her voice and he saddened at the thought of hurting Haku. Sorry, Haku, but I thought, never mind, but we need to keep up appearances at least, so that they don't get suspicious, he admitted. He also realized that Haku had from the night he had cleaned her up, she had devoted herself to him and that he was starting to feel for the girl in a similar way that he felt towards Sakura, maybe more so. He then said, Haku, I will be faithful to you. Haku giggled and replied quietly, you are my master. How many women you bed is up to you, but I'm not sure that I could hold myself back against that one with the way she treats you. It would be a short-lived liaison. Naruto paled at the implications, both the possibility of betting Sakura and that Haku might kill her after said betting. He wore a scared smile and nodded to Haku. She can be even scarier than Sakura, he thought to himself. He then moved to the stream and began to continue the water walking training. Kakashi showed up about an hour later, but seemed to be in a happy mood. Yo, do I have something for you guys, he stated happily. You're late, Sakura exclaimed. It might be worth it this time, Naruto replied in a counter-argument. Kakashi reached into his flak jacket and pulled out some card-sized pieces of paper. He then handed them out to everyone present. He then took one for himself and said, this is chakra paper. It was made from a tree that has been infused with chakra since it was a sapling, so when you channel chakra into it, it will show you something neat. Haku-san, if you will demonstrate. Haku nodded and channeled some chakra into the paper. It split down the middle and both pieces were very soggy. She then said, water and wind in equal parts. Thus a bloodline limit for ice is possible. Kakashi then nodded to Sakura and said, your turn, Sakura. Sakura nodded and began to concentrate. The paper turned black and started to fall apart. She quickly jumped away from the paper, only for it to fall into pieces, and those pieces fall slowly to the ground like pieces of ash. Kakashi cocked his head and said, interesting. What does it mean, Kakashi-sensei? Sakura asked. You have a chakra type that fits your fiery personality, Kakashi replied cryptically. Naruto began to laugh and said, you mean Sakura-chan is a fairy? Sakura became angry, but stayed her hand with the look from both Kakashi and Haku. Sasuke looked at her in a way he had never before, almost with interest. Everything okay, Sasuke-kun? She asked hesitantly. As soon as she asked, his face turned back into an unreadable mask. Haku then said, Naruto-sama, her element is fire. Kakashi-san was making a joke about it being fire and her temper, which she should keep in greater check. The last part had an emphasis on Sakura keeping her temper in check. Kakashi quickly said, and moving on, Sasuke, if you please. Sasuke pushed chakra into the paper and it crumpled. He looked at Kakashi in confusion and the teacher replied to the unasked question, you're like me, lightning is your primary affinity, but you can use others. Like Sakura, whose is fire? While the Uchiha prided themselves on learning fire techniques early, quite a few were not that type, so they would have to figure out how to change their chakra to that particular type of chakra to do the fire techniques asked for in being recognized as an adult. While I know how to use water, earth, and fire techniques, my primary affinity is lightning, and paradoxically I have trouble with wind techniques. He then demonstrated by pushing chakra into his paper and it crumpled like Sasuke's did. Naruto began to jump up and down, while shouting, my turn, my turn. Kakashi nodded and Naruto's brow furrowed when he pushed chakra into his hand with the paper in it. It split, but one side became damp and the other turned brown and fell apart like dust. He looked up at Kakashi, who wore shock on his face. He then asked timidly, what does that mean, Kakashi-sensei? It took a minute for Kakashi to reply, but when he did he said, Naruto, as usual, you're the most surprising shinobi of Konoha. Your affinities are wind, earth and water, meaning you might have a bloodline expansion. You more than likely will also be able to use ice, like Haku-san, wood like the first Hokage, and possibly something that combines earth and wind. Now before you get all excited like I know you will, listen to what I have to say. Training elemental affinities can take years to pull off and even decades to master. I'm sure it took Sasuke a long time to learn how to use fire. He looked at the Uchiha boy who nodded and said, yeah, it did. I spent years during the academy trying to learn it. It was a rite of passage for the Uchiha clan. It took about a year to be able to manifest the fire chakra and then another year to actually learn my first technique. Sasuke-kun is so cool, Sakura said with hearts in her eyes. Naruto's jaw dropped in exasperation. Naruto, you have real gift. While Haku-san has a limit, yours is stronger than his and more than likely will be passed on to your children. I would first though learn how to control one element and then work on your second. Haku would be the perfect instructor for this training. Sasuke, I want you to work with Sakura on how to learn the basics of fire chakra and Sakura, pay attention, since fire chakra can burn you easily. I have to report to the Hokage, but will be back, so begin your training in elemental chakra, Kakashi said and then disappeared. Haku walked Naruto over to the stream and said, first I want you to touch the water and push some chakra into it. Naruto did so, but nothing appeared to happen. She smiled warmly and then said, I want you to try to pull the water back to your hand. Forget about the chakra. He lifted his hand from the water and the water began to bob up towards his hand. He smiled and looked at Haku only for the glob of water to fall back into the stream. Ah, I lost it, Naruto said in a dejected tone. Haku giggled at this, but then said, play with it and don't worry if it doesn't always respond to you. That is how I learned how to work with water as a child. She then turned to Sasuke and said, you need to have more patience than you would with an Uchiha, Sasuke-san. She might not understand, so explain it to her. Sasuke scowled, but did what he was told. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Kakashi knocked on the door of the Hokage and waited for permission to enter. The door opened and the Hokage's old teammates, the elders, left the room both with scowls on their faces. He bowed to the elders who seemed to now notice the Junin and continued down the hall, away from the office. Kakashi entered the room, closed the door and asked, problems? Hiruzen chuckled and replied, nothing I can't handle. So what brings you here, Kakashi? Not another one of Naruto's pranks I hope. No, but he is the one that I wanted to talk to you about though, Kakashi replied in a serious tone. Sarutobi's featured hardened and he asked, what is the problem? Kakashi sighed and then said, not really a problem, for me or Haku maybe, but for you it might be a big one. Do you know what Naruto's elemental affinities are? Sarutobi raised an eyebrow and replied, no, and why would you be checking affinities so soon after they just graduated? And did you say affinities, as in more than one? Yes I did. As for why, well, Sasuke knows fire, while my other students don't know any elemental techniques, Kakashi explained. Yes, but that still doesn't answer my question, Hiruzen said almost angrily. Kakashi took a deep breath and then said, either the Kyuubi is playing games or Naruto has a bloodline expansion. His affinities are wind, water and earth. Sarutobi looked at the Junin in awe. The boy they had barely protected might have one of the most sought-after genetic mutations in the elemental nations. This would also prove problematic, in that the council would have to be informed about this, but he could put that off until he had performed the marriage ceremony for Naruto and Haku. He knew that he had put a lot on the girl's plate, but he was sure that she would pull through. He then asked, how is Haku holding out? I'm sure that he will happy when he can spend some time with Kikyo-sensei. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto stood there soaked, while Haku also was wet, but not to the same extent. Both wore wide grins on their faces. Haku smiled warmly and said, Naruto-kun, you have the basics for water manipulation. Now we need to work on working it into techniques. Sakura huffed and said, that's not fair, he's already getting water down and I'm still trying to figure out how to change my chakra, so that I can breathe fire. Sasuke sighed, but said, you finally are applying yourself. I'm impressed. Now if you don't want Naruto to get ahead of you, feel the heat in your lungs, as you push the chakra into it. Now exhale. Sakura exhaled and Sasuke was impressed. The girl had heated the air in her lungs quite a bit, not enough to create fire, but she had made more progress than he had when he had learned to do fire techniques. He then said, very good, you've got the basics. Now we need to increase the chakra and the heat. You've done in a day what took me months to do, I'm impressed. Sakura promptly fainted at being complimented by Sasuke. Naruto fell over laughing, while Haku appeared to be giggling like a girl would. This was weird, but he didn't take much notice. He then asked, what? I gave her a compliment and she faints. Over the next week Naruto was able to finally get water manipulation down and start to work on a technique. Haku had finally been able to go to sleep without crying at the end of the week. This made both of them happy. Now she believed that she could move on with her life and work on her life with Naruto. Haku has also convinced Naruto to get a new wardrobe. It nearly broke their finances, but he was happy and so was she. His pants were now black, but his jacket was camouflage consisting of burnt orange, black and gray. Haku had finally felt that her wounds were healed and was waiting for contact from Naruto's physician to clear her for work. Strength exercises, along with speed exercises were done in the evening. This though ran into a snag when they found someone watching them train together. Haku had shed her normal battle kimono for a light shirt and form-fitting pants for tonight's training. Sweat was rolling off of both of them and had begun to cause the shirts to stick to their bodies. This would seem to a non-casual observer, say a shinobi, that she was actually a she instead of a he. Naruto had shed his coat for a white shirt with an orange leaf insignia on it. She had to admit that his physique was improving, but he still looked like a nearly starved kid he had for the last couple weeks. Haku suddenly felt a presence in the bushes and created an ice senbon. She looked in the direction of the presence and threw it in such a way that it would either graze the person or it would just miss them. They both heard an eep from where the senbon had gone into the bushes. "Come out and show yourself or we'll come in after you," Naruto exclaimed. A blushing girl in a baggy coat and black paints came out of the bushes. It took a moment for Naruto to recognize her, but it hit him that it was Hyuga Hinata from the academy. "Sorry Naruto-kun," she said meekly, while Naruto walked closer. Haku had gathered her kimono and had put it on. She then moved towards the two. "Why were you spying on us?" Haku asked pointedly. Hinata immediately put her hands at her side and bowed deeply. She then said, "I'm sorry, please forgive me." Naruto stopped his approach when he saw tears fall from Hinata's eyes. He then asked, "What's wrong, Hinata?" Haku got over her anger quickly and began to observe the girl. Hinata straightened and then replied, "I was watching Naruto-kun." She then began to press her index fingers together and look around. "Naruto-kun, what is her full name?" Haku asked calmly. "Hyuga Hinata." "Why?" he asked. "As in, the heir to the Hyuga clan." Haku asked and Naruto shrugged, while Hinata turned her head, but nodded to the question. Haku then smirked and asked, "Do you like Naruto-kun?" Naruto turned to Haku and was about to ask a question, when he saw Haku point at Hinata. He turned to see Hinata's eyes wider than he thought anyone's eyes could be. Ha then asked, "Do you like me, Hinata?" Her mouth opened and nothing came out, but her head began to nod. Naruto would have laughed if he was sure that doing that would break the girl's heart. Haku then spoke up and asked, "Would you like to date Naruto-kun?" This was the straw that broke the camel's back. She turned bright red and fainted. Naruto ran to the girl's side, but Haku said, "She does like you and would like to date you, Naruto-kun." "But why me? I know we have two and I accept that you want to," Naruto said. "I would wait until she wakes up and ask her, or maybe I should ask her, since you're just a little blunt," Haku said with a snicker. Hinata smelled sweat, mixed with ramen scent. She smiled, thinking that she was dreaming that Naruto was holding her. Her eyes fluttered open, but she then saw a beautiful girl and Naruto both doting on her. She immediately tried to sit up, but was stopped by both of the others. "Naruto-kun," she said quietly. "What do you think of Haku?" Naruto asked. "She's pretty, Naruto-kun," Hinata answered. "So you can tell that I'm a girl?" Haku asked. Hinata nodded and replied, "The way you walk, your figure, and with the white shirt sticking to you. It wasn't hard to tell that you're female. So, you're with Naruto-kun?" Her face saddened at the question. Haku's face furrowed into a frown, but she then replied, "Naruto-kun doesn't have a choice of being with me, but he could still be with you also. I'm his servant and consort, so there is no way to get around that. If you would like you can have a relationship with him, but it won't be easy, since you're the heir to the Hyuga family, while Naruto-kun will be the head of the Uzumaki family. I cannot and will not stop him from having relationships with girls that love him. I give you permission to date him if you want to. I do understand that having multiple wives can either be a curse or blessing. I have already discussed this with the Hokage and he said that, while having multiple wives or husbands for that matter while rare, they are not against the law or illegal in Konoha. Hinata's lower lip trembled and tears welled up in her eyes. Naruto became worried and said, "Don't cry, Hinata, I'll give you a chance if you want. Haku's nice and she won't hurt you, and I'll do my best to try to go out on a date with you, Hinata." "Hinata, Haku-chan." Haku giggled and then she said, "You broke the poor girl. She fainted. I think that she is very attached to you. I would say that she is similar to how you were with Sakura-chan, but in her case she longs for you, but has problems expressing herself and with her confidence. That is the reason she was blushing and fainting. I think I should deal with her until she can get the stamina to deal with you. We need to find out if this is a crush or if she will truly love you." Love me?" Naruto asked. Haku giggled and gently caressed his face with her hand. "Yes, Naruto-kun, love. I know it is hard to believe that people will love you, but understand that we don't always have control of how we feel about others. If nothing else, you will get a great friend out of her. If it turns out to be love, she would make a good wife for you." Naruto felt Hinata's head hit his leg, just after he heard her let out an eep. Naruto sighed and said, "Don't tell me, she fainted again." Haku giggled and nodded. The next 10 minutes were spent waiting for Hinata to finally wake up. After that, Naruto began to spar with a clone, while Haku and Hinata discussed how she felt and why she felt that way. Haku concluded that for now it was a heavy crush, but it could lead to love, but she also noted admiration from the Hyuga girl and liked that quality. She concluded that Hinata wasn't quite ready to pursue a relationship with Naruto yet, other than a friendship. They could date, but they would also have to clear it with her father. This of course brought out more problems for Hinata and left Haku pondering about this village and how their thought processes worked. Naruto and Haku escorted Hinata home and set up a meeting with Hiashi for some time in the future. They then headed home and took a shower together. They then soaked in the tub together. Naruto was laying back into Haku, who was playing with his hair. She discussed with Naruto that she liked the girl and would not stop him from pursuing her as a second prospective wife. She also warned him of having multiple wives, especially if they didn't get along. This annoyed Naruto, but only slightly. He had noticed, his feelings for Sakura were beginning to wane. He attributed it to his blossoming feelings for Haku, the way Sakura was acting towards him, and the revelation that Hinata had feelings towards him. He didn't really know what to think about it, but he knew that Haku would help him through it. He enjoyed the time that he spent with Haku, and was feeling more at ease with her. He chuckled at the thought of how in the middle of the week a makeout session had nearly become the consummation of their marriage. She had suggested that they bathe together to alleviate the tension, since he wasn't experienced. His age played a factor in it, so did her being the older of the two. She wanted to lead her master and not get them into trouble. He felt sort of bad and happy that he rose and then fell to the occasion. Haku, while disappointed, had also told him that she was happy that they hadn't done it yet. She wanted to talk to the doctor first. They also discussed how they would deal with Hiashi. XXXXXXXXXXX. There was a knock on the door early the next morning. Naruto groggily got up and answered it in his boxers. He found a giggling woman at the door, who he quickly realized who it was. He then exclaimed, "Hey Kikyo-sensei." She smiled warmly at the boy and asked, "May I come in? I'm here to see Haku-san and yourself, Naruto-kun." Naruto nodded and let her in. She looked around and smiled warmly. She then said, "So is the blushing bride in the bedroom?" Naruto looked at her in confusion and asked, "Why wouldn't she be? That's where we sleep." Kikyo's face became serious and she said, "I have to ask a personal question, Naruto-kun." He nodded and she then asked, "Have you two consummated the marriage yet?" Naruto blushed, but then replied, "We got close the other night, but no, we haven't. She and I are worried about how I was able to heal her. I used the Kyuubi's chakra to heal a Reikiri wound to the chest." Kikyo gasped, but then Naruto continued, "She was worried that it might affect her having our children, and she keeps on saying we're a little young to be having kids yet." Kikyo giggled and then said, "Yes, at 12 and barely out of puberty. My little Naruto-kun is growing up, but yes. You're too young to have children. Now, I need both of you for this examination." Naruto walked into the bedroom followed by Kikyo. Naruto leaned over and kissed Haku on the cheek. This elicited a, "Just another 5 minutes, Naruto-kun." Naruto smirked and then kissed her on the lips. Haku wrapped her arms around Naruto and they deepened the kiss. Kikyo blushed, but said nothing. Haku finally broke the kiss and asked, "That was nice. Do you want to make love to me before I see the doctor?" Naruto gave her a chaste kiss and then replied, "She is right here and is ready for the exam." Haku's eyes sprung open and she looked around. Seeing an older woman in their bedroom was shocking, but with Naruto being at ease with the woman, so would she. She then said, "Hello Kikyo-sensei. I'm Haku and Naruto-kun has told me a lot about you." Kikyo smirked and said, "I'm sure it was all the scary stuff, but it is a pleasure to meet you, Haku-san." Her features hardened and she said, "I need both of you to strip and lay on the bed. We can do it one at a time to spare you any embarrass." She stopped when Naruto had shucked his boxers and jumped onto the bed. Haku removed her clothing, folded it and put it on the nightstand. She blushed, but then said, "I see that you're at ease with each other. That will make it easier. Now Haku-chan, I'm going to do a deep scan, it might tingle, so don't be afraid. I need to see what type of damage exposure to the Kyuubi's chakra did to you." Haku nodded while she remained still on the bed. Kikyo did several hand seals and her hands began to glow a blue-green. She then ran her hands over Haku's body. She started at the head and moved down. She grimaced when she got to the scar on her chest, but said nothing. She ran her hands down each arm, then Haku's abdomen. She moved down Haku's body and finally stopped at the feet. She then moved back to Haku's chest and appeared to be doing a deeper examination. She then asked, "Haku-chan, can you take a deep breath and then let it out?" Haku took a deep breath and then slowly released it. Kikyo then moved back down to Haku's abdomen and moved her hand around the area. Naruto watched in fascination. He then asked, "Why are you spending so much time around her vagina?" Kikyo smirked and said, "Where did you learn that word? But to answer your question, I'm examining her cervix, vaginal canal, uterus and ovaries. She could have children now, but I would advise against it, since young parents have the most problems with dealing with children and since Naruto is still one himself." Naruto growled, while Haku giggled and he exclaimed, "Hey! I'm a man, a shinobi of the leaf." Kikyo smirked, patted his head and then said, "Why yes you are and it is your turn, big man." Naruto scowled, but watched as Kikyo's hand moved down his body, stopping above his privates. He scowled, but said nothing. She moved down his legs and then ended the technique. She then said, "You both can get dressed and then we will discuss my results in the living room." She left the room and closed the door behind them. A knock was heard at the front door and Naruto grew pale. Naruto and Haku quickly dressed. Naruto went with his new outfit for today. Naruto heard Sakura's voice and she asked, "Who are you?" He smirked and waited for a moment. He then heard Kikyo reply, "I'm the Uzumaki's personal physician. I came to check up on the injury of Haku-san and to do a check on Naruto-kun. So may I ask what you're doing here, Haruno-san?" "I was here to thank Haku-kun for helping me break the ice with Sasuke-kun," Sakura replied, but the happy shrill was evident. Naruto looked at an apologetic-looking Haku. Naruto rolled his eyes and then left through the open door. He chuckled internally when Sakura's face fell when she saw it was him and not Haku. Naruto smiled and asked, "So did you come to confess your love for me, Sakura-chan?" Sakura recovered from Naruto's barb quickly and threw a punch at Naruto, while exclaiming, "Naruto!" Naruto dodged the initial punch, but then grabbed Sakura's arm on the second punch and quickly turned and pushed his hip into her. This caused her to become unbalanced and fly head over heels over his head. He didn't release his grip and allowed her to hit the couch full force. This caused the legs of the couch to buckle from the force and the springs to break from their moorings in the wood in the couch. She let out a gruff exhalation when she hit. Naruto then said angrily, "You attack me in my own house. You keep coming over uninvited. We have the day off for Kami's sake. You know I really did like you, but the attacks have to stop. This is my sanctuary and I will not be attacked here. You know the Hokage used to post an Anbu to guard me when I was younger, to protect me from errant villagers. They stopped because of the Anbu, so they haven't bugged me here since." His anger seemed to grow with each statement. He continued, "You've always hit me, even when there was no real reason other than for you to blow off some steam. I ask you if you want to play, you hit me and say, no one would want to play with a baka like you. I ask you for a date, you hit me and say, no one would want to go out with someone like you, especially when there's Sasuke-kun around. Well, let me give you some information. There are people who would like to go out with a person like me. By the way, what have you meant by, a person like me?" Sakura looked up at Naruto and saw that his eyes were still blue, but instead of normal pupils, they were now slits. She rolled onto the floor and began to scoot away from her angry teammate. This is what I meant. My mother said that you were a monster and to avoid you. Now I know what she means. Monster. You call me a monster. I'm not the one who is abusive. A monster wouldn't try to do everything for someone, no matter how badly they treated them, Naruto said angrily, but also his eyes had turned purple and the killing intent was rising. Haku quickly came up behind Naruto and wrapped her arms around him and whispered into his ear. Naruto visibly relaxed and his eyes turned back to their normal blue. Haku then faced Sakura and said, "While I'm glad I could help you with Sasuke-san, I'm afraid that you'll have to leave. You've upset Naruto-kun and given his feelings for you, which I might add you have stomped on, more than likely for the last time. He is quite hurt right now by your actions. I was able to calm him down, but realized that he has been alone most if not all his life. Hated by those he is now entrusted to protect. All he wanted from you was some acknowledgement and a possible date, no matter what the outcome." Sakura looked on and tilted her head and then noticed the tears falling from Naruto's face. He still wore a look of anger, but she then saw the look of hurt in his eyes. She gasped and realized what she had been doing. She slowly got up and started to walk closer to Naruto, but halted when he began to growl. Kikyo cleared her throat, getting the attention of everyone and said, "While it is charming that you want to apologize to Naruto-kun, he isn't in the receiving mood right now and I do have other things to do. This is a clan issue and I will have to ask you to leave." "Clan? Naruto isn't from a clan," Sakura said in confusion. "Actually he is from an old and prestigious clan, the Uzumaki. The swirl pattern you see on the back of most Junin and Chunin vests along with the one on Naruto's arm are the symbol of the Uzumaki. So great was their sacrifice, that Konoha decided to acknowledge them with incorporating their clan seal into that of our uniforms. You see, the Hidden Eddy village sacrificed itself to help Konoha. Now, enough of the history lesson, Sakura, please leave," Kikyo said authoritatively. Sakura nodded and went out the door, while closing it behind her. Kikyo then touched the couch and it collapsed. She smiled worriedly and said, "Sorry, but we need to talk." Naruto sighed and leaned his head against Haku's, who smiled at the touch. He then said, "We can talk at the table, Kikyo-sensei." The trio moved to the table and each took a seat. Haku reached out and took Naruto's hand that was on the table, both to reassure him and to do the same for herself. Kikyo sighed and then began. "I can report that Haku-chan is in near perfect health and can do full training with you, Naruto-kun. I would also advise that if you two decide to have within the next week, I would either use contraception or a contraceptive technique." Naruto looked at her in confusion and asked, "What's contraception?" Haku smirked, but then replied, "It is an attempt to prevent me from becoming pregnant. There are several methods. A condom, pills, and then there are shinobi techniques." She then saw more confusion in his face, so she continued, "When you release sperm and without something to block it from getting to my egg, then a child could be born." Naruto's face became fearful and he asked, "Even on the first time?" Kikyo replied, "If the conditions are right, one time is all that is needed. Also, even using contraceptives doesn't always work. Condoms are a barrier to block sperm from entering the female's body entirely, but they sometimes leak. Pills take time and don't always stop ovulation. Chakra-based techniques are on the same level as our condoms, but allow for you not to have the barrier. It is about 95% effective or higher depending on the chakra control of the female using the technique, but there is one for the male, but I discourage it." Naruto and Haku looked at her and he asked, "Why?" Kikyo frowned and then replied, "It will kill all the sperm in the male for about 72 hours, but you will be in pain for about 24. It requires chakra to be focused in the testicles, and if you have horrible control, you could sterilize yourself. Both Naruto and Haku paled. Kikyo smirked and continued, now you see why I don't recommend it. I believe that Naruto-kun would make it so that he would end the line, so to speak, and I'm sure that Haku-chan wouldn't be happy with that. I recommend that you use the female technique, Haku. I will teach it to you tomorrow afternoon when you come to the hospital for your fist shift. I was informed that you didn't want people to know that you're female just yet. Haku nodded to the statement, but Kikyo continued, you will have to take your role of a female nurse within a week, so I would learn the technique, bag our sweet Naruto-kun and be done with it, since at that point you would be untouchable. Also, the Hokage told me that both of you will be at the meeting next week of the Council of Clans and the full council afterwards. You both will have an observatory role there, since neither of you are Junin. If you would like, I could sit as your clan's representative at the meeting. Naruto looked at Haku, who nodded. Kikyo smiled and then said, so now that that has been decided, I will leave you to play, but no, without a condom today, and tomorrow after you learn the technique you can go at it until you're blue in the face. Both Naruto and Haku blushed. Kikyo put her hand on each of the couple's hands and then said, while you're not ready yet to be parents, I believe that you will be good ones. I also think that it was both silly and very cunning of Sarutobi to do this to the two of you. She then smiled warmly and asked, I hear that you have a bloodline, Naruto-kun. With Haku-chan you can pass the ice down and even possible the wood line down to your children, and we would see the re-emergence of the Senju, or at least a similar line to the first Hokage. Well, have a good day, kids, and don't have any kids for a few years. I would recommend that Haku-chan not have children until she is 18 or so, to make sure that she has finished growing into the beautiful young woman that she was intended. Haku blushed, but Naruto said, I think she's beautiful right now. This caused Haku to turn bright red. Kikyo stood and headed towards the door. She left quietly, not being noticed by Naruto, who had been literally tackled by Haku, who didn't seem to want Naruto to take a breath, because of her kissing him. The makeout session continued for a little while and even got them to move to the bedroom. Haku was able to finally control herself when she had taken off her shirt and Naruto was kissing and sucking on her. Naruto-kun, we need to stop, she said, nearly out of breath. Naruto looked up into her brown eyes and asked, why? Because if we don't, we will consummate our marriage and I more than likely will get pregnant. I'm sorry, it's my fault. I was just overjoyed that you thought I was beautiful and I felt the urge, and well, one thing led to another. We can do it either tomorrow night or we can wait. It is up to you, master, she explained, but he could tell that there was longing in her eyes. She would continue, but knew that they had to stop or there would be problems. Naruto nodded and kissed her on the lips. They then put their clothes back on. The rest of the day both wore light blushes and smiles that wouldn't quit. They trained lightly that evening with Hinata, who agreed to talk to her father about a meeting. She knew that it would take time for her to win Naruto's heart. Haku and Naruto praised her on her progress on her working on her taijutsu. Haku had a few pointers and Hinata took them to heart. She really began to like Haku and her feelings for Naruto deepened. The thing that disturbed her was when Naruto began an explanation that brought fear into her heart. Hinata, I won't lie to you. Sakura and I had a fight today and I think I'm falling in love with Haku-chan. Which is good since we're getting married, in a way we're already married. This sent a chill down Hinata's spine. Haku saw this and reached out to the girl and gave her a hug. She then said, it's not that we really had a choice, but if afterwards and your father agrees, I will not oppose you and Naruto dating. Since you're younger than him, I will not allow you to marry him until you're older, say 16. I know it is a little over 3 years for you, but if things go well then it will be worth it. Naruto-kun appreciates your feelings towards him and he is still trying to understand feelings, but since he really didn't have any way to understand relationships he wouldn't be opposed to marrying you if it works out. I also say that we would get along well together, unlike Sakura-san and I. Please get us that meeting with your father before the clan meeting. If not then your chances will diminish. Hinata looked into the girl's eyes that was holding her and nodded. I can still be with Naruto-kun, she thought to herself. She wasn't sure what type of relationship it would be, but she still had a chance. She also noticed that Naruto's mannerism had improved. For this she was appreciative of Haku for helping her Naruto. She wanted to jump into his arms and into his bed to prove her feelings for the boy, but didn't have the confidence to do such a thing. She thought that using Haku to help her and Naruto to help her with her confidence. She then asked, I'm not very good and am weak. I need your help to get the meeting with my father. Will you come with me? Naruto scowled and replied, sure, we'll come with you, but I know that you're strong. This brought a smile to the Hyuga girl. Naruto got up and helped both Haku and Hinata to their feet. Haku then said happily, such a gentleman. Naruto kissed her on the cheek and the trio left the training grounds for the Hyuga compound. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Hinata led them to the entrance, but found her cousin standing there. The boy scowled at Hinata and then at the Uzumaki. Neji then said, I was just dispatched to fetch you, Hinata-sama. You are out past curfew. Your father and the council will be most displeased. Naruto attempted to imitate the look on Neji's face, but not having the sour disposition, he failed utterly. Sorry man, but you had it coming, Naruto said to the angry Hyuga boy. I know who you are, Dobi, but do not understand why you're here, Neji said angrily. Naruto straightened out his outfit and then said in a serious tone, I am Uzumaki Naruto, head of the Uzumaki clan. I am here to speak with Hiashi-sama on inter-clan business that isn't your business. Take yourself and your girl away from here, before I remove you, Neji threatened. Naruto waved as if it didn't matter, but then said, if it gets to Hiashi-sama that you turned me away, you might be in trouble. Also we have the clan heir inviting me to see her father and you say that you're going to evict me, even before I step foot on the premises. Neji nodded and replied, that is right. I know that you're the pariah and prankster of the village. I will not allow someone like you to sully the Hyuga clan. His eyes were closed for the second sentence. He opened his eyes to see both Hinata and Haku giggle in his direction. He turned his head to see Naruto looking at his butt. He then asked, what do you think you're doing? Naruto cupped his chin and replied, I'm not sure how you can have a bigger stick pushed up your butt than Sasuke Tem, but it appears to be the case. Haku began to laugh heartily at this. Hinata couldn't help but begin to laugh. Neji by now was becoming quite mad, as he chased Naruto around in a circle, in an attempt to confront the boy for insulting him. Will you stop moving? He asked angrily. Naruto continued to both avoid being in front of Neji and also the strikes that the boy was throwing at him. Naruto replied happily, not going to happen. Just starting to get Sakura to stop hitting me and I'm not going to have you replace her. You are a guy, right? Hinata then said while laughing, that was mean to say to my cousin, Naruto-kun. Neji began to stumble and finally fell on his butt, before Naruto would actually stand in front of the boy. Naruto then said, while that was fun, don't ever insult me or those that I care about, or you'll get worse than a dizzy spell and land on your ass. Attention became centered behind them when a male voice asked, what is going on here? Hinata stopped laughing and looked down. She then said, Father, these are the Uzumaki and they would like to speak with you. The man bore an imposing visage, but nodded and said, come with me. He led the trio through several hallways into a room. He opened the door and ushered them into the room. He closed the door after them and then took a seat behind a table with several scrolls laid out on it. He then said, I'm a busy man, so what do the Uzumaki want with me and my clan? Naruto swallowed hard, but Haku spoke. Hiashi-sama, the Uzumaki wish your permission to court your daughter, she said authoritatively. Why would I allow my daughter to date and then eventually marry a girl? He asked, while looking directly at Haku. Naruto scratched the back of his head and replied, well, it's not Haku-chan that wants to date Hinata-chan. It's me. He eyed the boy with a glare that Naruto could have sworn would kill the Kyuubi. He then said, I see. Naruto sighed and said, I'm not too good with words and am terrible at politics, so I will just come out and say what I mean. Hiashi nodded and said, I prefer that, but we are shinobi and being able to see deceit is part of what we do. What is the reason you wish to court my daughter? I understand that this girl is your servant. Naruto thought for a minute and replied, Haku is my servant, but in actuality I'm only asking to date Hinata-chan to find out if we even have a chance together. I know that she likes me and I think of her as a friend, but want to know if it can be more. I'm not good with personal skills, mainly because of the village and how they treat me, because of the Kyubi. If it is only to date my daughter, I will allow it for now, but dating is all you can do. You may go on missions with her team, but you must sleep separately. I don't want my daughter to give me grandchildren too soon. It will also give her time to focus on her training and not so much on her stalking of yourself. Naruto looked confusingly at Hinata, who just blushed. Naruto also then said, I must also inform you that I am being forced to marry Haku-chan here. You say too much, but I figured that it is the Hokage behind such a move. What is so special about you, girl? Hiyashi asked. I am a Hyouden user, Haku replied. Hiyashi nodded and then said, I will monitor her progress in her training. If she begins to slack off or start to have problems, I will discontinue your relationship with my daughter. I know that it is her wish and I want to give her some happiness. I know the laws that allow for polygamy, which I'm not fond of. I will, like I said, allow it for now. Naruto then said, I also possess a bloodline expansion, which could include both ice and wood. That would be an asset. If after time you and my daughter were to have children, and I mean if. I would like for some of them to marry back into the Hyuga. Is that acceptable? He asked sternly. Naruto nodded and then asked, so you don't have a problem with me being married to Haku and also dating your daughter? Hiyashi took a deep breath and then replied, it doesn't make me happy, but it would also help me keep the elders off my back when it comes to Hinata. While she is improving, she isn't progressing fast enough for the elders. If I say that she has a suitor, they will back off and it will give her time to improve. He then looked sternly at Hinata and said, for this to work, you will have to begin to beat your sister in your matches. Your style is too timid right now. Knowing Uzumaki-san, he might help you be able to surprise your sister and begin to win some of the matches. He then looked at Naruto and said, she might be able to help you with your chakra problem. As for the possible relationship, I prefer monogamous ones, but we are shinobi and our lives can be short. I hope this will work out for